The silence of the night was broken only by the howling wind and the distant cries of wild beasts. Stone Age people huddled deep inside their caves, pressing close to one another for warmth. In those days, darkness was not just the absence of light. It was the presence of danger, the constant shadow of death. On nights when not even a flicker could pierce the blackness, only the pale glow of the moon kept them company. Children shivered, women held their babies tightly to keep them from crying out, and the men stood guard at the cave's entrance with stone clubs in hand. Outside lurked lions, leopards, bears, and wolves. In that world of shadows, there was only one miracle that could set humankind apart from the beasts and give them power over nature itself, fire. But that miracle had not yet been theirs to command. Without fire, humans were defenseless, not only against the cold, hunger, and darkness, but also against their own fears. They hunted to survive, eating their meat raw, trembling through freezing nights, praying for dawn. Their stone tools aided them in the hunt, but they could not bring warmth, nor could they chase away the terrors of the night. Humanity's greatest leap was still waiting to be made, and when it came, it would change the balance of the world forever. Imagine this. One night the sky suddenly blazes with light. A bolt of lightning crashes into dry trees, and the forest erupts in flames. Primitive humans recoil in terror, yet they are transfixed. To their eyes, this fiery glow was no ordinary thing. It was a gift from the gods, or perhaps a curse. The flames climbed into the heavens, banishing the night, turning darkness into day, and then a single figure dares to step forward. Overcoming fear, reaching out with trembling hands, they seize a burning branch. In that moment, history shifted. Fire was no longer a force of nature alone. It had become human. Before the discovery of fire, human life was harsher and more merciless than we can even imagine today. The simplest things we now take for granted, cooking a meal, lighting the darkness, or staying warm on a cold night, were for them the very line between survival and death. For early humans, daylight was the only safe time to live. When the sun was high, they could hunt, gather fruits, and interact with their tribe. But once night fell, the world was transformed. Darkness stripped them of their sight and dulled their senses, leaving them utterly vulnerable to predators. In those days, humans shared the land with fearsome beasts. Lions, leopards, hyenas, bears, and wolves all prowled the night, watching silently from the shadows. Humans tried to defend themselves with stone clubs and sharpened spears, but these primitive weapons were no match for the jaws and claws of a lion or bear. And so, when night arrived, people retreated into caves, often blocking the entrances with heavy rocks. To them, the cave was not merely a shelter, it was the fragile wall that stood between life and death. Yet even the cave offered no true peace. On freezing nights, its stone walls turned into icy prisons, and breathing within the cold, damp air became a struggle. With no thick fur to protect them, humans shivered violently, using their bodies as shields to warm their children. Many did not survive until morning, perishing in their sleep from the cold. Death from the elements was an ordinary occurrence, for nature had no mercy. Food, too, was a constant struggle. Raw meat wore down teeth, strained jaws, and often poisoned the stomach. Even after a successful hunt, chewing through flesh took hours and digestion could drag on for days. Raw meat carried parasites and disease, leading to frequent death. Roots and fibrous plants which had to be eaten uncooked were almost as difficult, forcing jaws to work like grinding stones. Their powerful chewing muscles were a testament to survival, but even this strength could not free them from hunger's grip. Life in the night was not only about hunger and cold, it was also about fear. At the faintest snap of a twig, the entire tribe would awaken, holding its breath. The howl of a hyena, the growl of a leopard near the cave entrance, or the heavy steps of a bear following a scent could send waves of panic through every heart. In their minds, darkness became the very image of death and the unknown. And so, when the heavens suddenly lit up with lightning, or when thunder cracked across the sky, It stirred not only terror, but also curiosity. And yet, amidst all this hardship, one thing stood out. Humans could only survive by standing together. Unity was not a choice, it was a necessity. Bonds of cooperation grew strong, tribes formed, leaders emerged, tasks were divided. While women cared for the children, men hunted, and the elders passed their knowledge to the young. Long before fire, humans were already laying the foundations of social life. But still, something was missing. Stone tools could cut, caves could conceal, but nothing gave them true mastery over nature. Against hunger, cold, and predators, there was no lasting solution. Humanity stood on the edge of change, waiting. One spark, just a single flame, would forever alter their destiny. And that is why fire was not merely a discovery. It was humanity's first act of defiance against nature, the moment they seized control of their fate. That miraculous moment, when it finally came, became one of the greatest turning points in all of history. That day, the sky was unlike anything they had ever seen. Dark clouds gathered heavily on the horizon, warning of an approaching storm. The wind roared through the forest, bending branches until they cracked. At the mouth of a cave, the first humans stood together, watching this strange spectacle above with unease. To them, the sky was full of mysteries. Rain, lightning, and thunder were terrifying signs of powers they could not understand. Then the heavens split open. A bolt of lightning blazed across the sky and struck the ground. A blinding flash lit the world, followed by a thunderclap so loud it seemed to tear the earth apart. Women and children screamed, fleeing into the darkness of the cave, while the men stared helplessly at the storm above. In that moment, one of the greatest shocks in human history unfolded, for in the distance, smoke began to rise among the dry trees. Soon came the crackling sound of wood, and sparks flew upward as branches burst into flame. As the fire spread, waves of heat reached outward, and the night itself seemed to vanish. A darkness once broken only by the moon and stars was now torn apart by a wall of flames climbing into the sky. The people gazed in awe and terror. Some fell to their knees, believing it to be divine punishment, the wrath of the heavens. Others could not look away, transfixed by this strange new power. For this was different. This was unlike anything they had ever known. A few brave souls, driven by curiosity stronger than fear, dared to approach the burning trees. Their steps were slow, their hearts pounding wildly in their chests. The closer they came, the more the heat scorched their faces and filled their eyes with tears. Then one of them spotted a fallen branch still burning at its tip. With trembling hands he reached down. The smoke stung his throat, the crackle of the flames rang in his ears, yet he pushed forward. Curiosity overcame terror. In one swift motion, he seized the branch, and in that instant a door opened in human history, one that could never be closed. That branch was no longer just a piece of burning wood. It was the first symbol of humanity's dominion over nature. The flames hissed and danced, sparks leaping into the air, as the tribe stared in wonder. Carefully, they carried it back toward the cave, and for the first time, a new feeling stirred within them, safety. The fire's glow pushed back the shadows, its warmth wrapped around their bodies, and the beasts of the night hesitated. No eyes glimmered at the edge of the cave anymore. Predators that once ruled the darkness shrank from the fire's brilliance. For the first time, humans realized they did not have to pass the night in fear. Fire had not only banished the darkness, it had banished their terror. Yet their first attempts ended in disappointment. The burning branches soon turned black, crumbling to ash. They had no knowledge of how to keep the flame alive. When they tried to bring it into the cave, it sputtered out, leaving only smoke. Their joy turned to despair. Women wept, men pounded the stones in frustration. To lose that miracle of light meant falling back into the endless night. But not all gave up, for once humans had seen fire, they could never return to the way things were. Something inside them had changed forever. They tried again. They fed the flames with dry leaves and branches. Smoke rose, then came crackles, then a flicker of light, and at last a flame took hold. This time it was their triumph. Shouts of joy filled the air as they embraced one another. Fear gave way to wonder, despair to hope. That night, for the very first time, fire burned at the entrance of a cave. People gathered around it, children smiling as they drifted into warm sleep, women breathing deeply with relief, men stretching their hands toward the glow as though trying to understand its mystery. The light did not only illuminate the cave, it illuminated the path of humanity's future. The power of fire had touched their hearts. From that moment on, the nights would no longer be endless hours of fear. The cold would not claim them so easily. And above all, humankind, for the first time, felt itself rising above nature. While the eyes of beasts shone in the dark, shrinking back from the flames, a new age for mankind had begun. When the first fire was kindled, humans felt not only its light and warmth, but also the mysterious power of nature itself. That night, gathered around the flames burning at the cave's entrance, they began to realize that, for the first time in history, they had gained an advantage over the darkness. The fire's dancing light cast moving shadows across the walls, twisting and shifting like giant creatures. Children, frightened by these shapes, clung to their mothers, but soon the soothing warmth calmed them, and they drifted into sleep. It was the first true comfort fire ever gave to the human spirit. Protecting the fire quickly became a matter of survival. People learned that once the flames died, they had no way of rekindling them. Keeping the fire alive became a sacred duty. Each night someone stood watch, feeding dry branches onto the embers, shielding the flames with their hands when the wind threatened to snuff them out. Fire was treated almost like a living being, a sacred presence. To let it die was to endanger the entire tribe. Anyone careless enough to extinguish it was seen as an enemy, guilty of the greatest offense. Soon, they discovered fire was their strongest weapon against predators. Packs of wolves that once prowled near the caves now turned away from the fiery glow. The eyes of lions flashed in the light before vanishing back into the darkness. For the first time, people passed the night without fear. Men no longer relied only on stone clubs when standing guard. Now they held burning branches in their hands. Even a single flame at the tip of a stick was enough to drive away the fiercest beast. With safety secured, attention turned to hunger. Out of curiosity, humans began to bring their freshly hunted meat close to the fire. At first they made mistakes, tossing it directly into the flames until it burned to blackened ash. The bitter smoke filled the cave and much of the meat was lost. But over time, they learned to place it near the embers, letting it cook slowly. When they tasted the first properly roasted pieces, they looked at each other in amazement. The toughness of raw flesh was gone, replaced by something soft, easy to chew, and filled with a new flavor. That day, humanity discovered not just fire, but cooking. They found that cooked meat kept them full longer, no longer upset their stomachs, and was easier for children to eat. Food was no longer just sustenance, it became strength. Humans grew healthier, more resilient, illness diminished, and children thrived. Fire was no longer just a source of warmth, but a turning point in the very health and endurance of the human body. Yet fire gave them more than food. Around the flames, people could finally spend their nights together. The silence of darkness was replaced with voices, stories, and laughter. Women told children about their ancestors. Elders recounted great hunts. Children played with the shadows and traced figures on the cave walls. Men planned the next day's hunt, shaping ideas for new tools. Fire did not only protect the body, it bound the tribe together, awakening something deeper within them. This was the first step toward culture. For the tales told by the fire would later grow into myths, rituals, and beliefs. Fire was not only a power that fed the body, it nourished memory, identity, and imagination. Humans also began to notice other qualities of fire. Stones tossed into the flames cracked under the heat, breaking into sharper edges that made better tools. Burnt bones splintered more easily, and ash left strange patterns behind. Humanity was learning to transform the materials of nature through fire. These small observations lit the path to pottery, mining, and eventually the age of metal. With each passing night, fire became a little more familiar and yet all the more indispensable. A life without it could no longer be imagined. Fire had become the great dividing line between human and beast. To master it was to take the first step out of nature's chains and into the role of its master. By then, fire had grown beyond a mere physical need. It had taken on a mental and cultural dimension. People no longer used it only for cooking food or driving away beasts. They began to seek meaning in its mysterious nature. The sparks leaping into the air reminded them of stars in the sky, while the glowing embers that dimmed and flared again seemed to echo the cycle of life itself. From such simple observations, the first myths and rituals of humankind were born. In many groups, the duty of guarding the fire was entrusted to the elders or to figures of respect within the tribe. Fire was not seen as a simple tool, but as a sacred trust. In some communities, children were forbidden even to touch it, for flames were thought to be the dwelling place of spirits. To keep the fire alive, people whispered prayers, sometimes danced around it, or beat stones rhythmically to offer the flames a kind of tribute. These small acts were the first steps toward the religious ceremonies of the future. The stories told around the fire became increasingly enchanted. One night an old hunter told the children, long ago a great bird lived in the heavens. It carried a piece of the sun in its beak and gave it to humankind, so that the darkness would never last forever. Wide-eyed, the children gazed into the flames as though they were truly touching a fragment of the sky. Such tales gave birth to the first myths in the human imagination. Over time, rituals around the fire grew more elaborate. After a successful hunt, the hunters would pause before cooking the animal, speaking words to its spirit and throwing the first piece into the flames. This was both an act of respect for nature and a way of feeding the fire itself. To them, fire was not only sustenance, it was a bridge to the unseen world. Women sat by the fire, showing their children animal figures drawn on cave walls. "Look," they would say, pointing to a bison, "this is what we hunted. In the firelight, we bring it to life again." And thus, under the glow of fire, art was born. The drawings, the flickering shadows, and the spoken word merged into the first theater, the first expressions of human creativity. Every night, fire became a stage, and upon it, people brought to life nature, animals, gods, and dreams. But the cultural power of fire extended beyond stories. It also became a tool for order within the tribe. Those who guarded the flames commanded respect, for all knew that if the fire died, darkness would return, and hunger and fear would rule again. To hold the fire was to hold power. This link between flame and authority paved the way for the rise of kings, priests, and shamans in the ages to come. Fire became the first true symbol of power. Some tribes believed fire came from the heavens, a gift of the storm gods, while others thought it belonged to the spirits of the underworld. Many saw lightning as the fire of the gods and treated it with reverence. Natural events and the mythology of fire intertwined, feeding the roots of humanity's earliest belief systems. Gradually, fire became more than an element. It became an identity. When humans began to see themselves as distinct from other creatures, the torch in their hand was their emblem. A community encircled by flames no longer saw itself as mere survivors, but as beings with the power to shape the future. And so, fire gave humanity its greatest gift, imagination. In the light of the flames, people began to dream, to envision the future, to wonder about the unknown. Perhaps the very first spark of civilization was struck not from stone, but from the glowing embers around which they sat. The power of fire was no longer confined to a single community. It had become humanity's greatest companion on the long journeys of migration. People constantly moved, following game, searching for new sources of food, or adapting to changing climates. In the past, these journeys were terrifying struggles, filled with freezing nights and impenetrable darkness. But with the discovery of fire, humans began to travel with confidence. When a group set out toward new lands, special individuals were chosen to carry and protect the fire. They carefully preserved the glowing embers in stone bowls, covering them with ash to keep them alive for days. Letting the fire die during a journey was considered a disaster. If the embers went out, it endangered not just one group's safety, but the fate of the entire expedition. Fire became, in essence, a life insurance for migrating communities. With fire in hand, humans could adapt to new climates. In icy regions, the flames warmed their bodies, making otherwise perilous journeys survivable. Smoke rising from the fire helped lost hunters find their way, while flames kept wild animals at bay during the night. In this way, fire opened the path for humans to spread across the globe. As migrations continued, different communities began to encounter one another. Each group had its own ways of using fire, developing unique rituals. Some surrounded it with stones to control it, others danced around it in reverence. During these meetings, people exchanged not only food and tools, but also knowledge about fire. In this way, fire became a cultural bridge between human communities. The cultural power of fire also influenced social dynamics and conflict. When one group sought to assert dominance over another, it could do so by displaying fire. Lighting larger flames was a show of strength. Fire stood at the center of early battles and peace agreements alike. Some groups shared fire to form alliances, while others kept it secret to keep rivals weak. Migration also expanded the uses of fire in daily life. Along their routes, humans discovered new plants and experimented with cooking them. Some herbs lost their bitterness when roasted, while roots became tastier when placed near the embers. These culinary experiments transformed the human diet. Fire made it possible not only to eat meat, but also to enjoy plants, widening their nutritional options. The smoke of fire took on new significance as well. People noticed that dense smoke could be seen from a distance. Fire thus became a signaling tool for migrating groups. Lost parties could spot the smoke and reconnect with others. Communities could locate one another. This was an early step toward communication. Sending messages through smoke would eventually evolve into symbols, signs, and finally language itself. Along migration routes, fire was not just a practical tool, it was a beacon of hope. A small flame burning in the darkness gave courage to the tired, hungry, and fearful. Fire became a guiding symbol in the human mind. Sometimes a group's leader would carry a torch at the front, illuminating the path and providing reassurance to the entire tribe. As a result of these journeys, humanity spread across continents. The adventure that began in Africa reached the forests of Asia, the ice-covered lands of Europe, and even crossed oceans to the Americas. Behind this vast expansion shone the light of fire in human hands. Without it, humans might never have found the courage to traverse such immense distances. Fire carried not only the bodies of migrating humans, but also their spirit. It led them out of darkness and toward the future. Every tiny spark along the migration paths bore silent witness to humanity's first steps toward civilization.